and start talking about factors. So what is a factor? A factor of a number is any number that can be used to divide that number and you're still left with a non-decimal, non-fraction number at the end. So 1 would be a factor of 24. When you divide by 2, you get a whole number, so 2 is a factor. When you divide by 3, you get a whole number, so 3 is a factor. When you divide by 4, you get a non-decimal number, so 4 is a factor. However, when you divide by 5, you do get a decimal. So 5 is not a factor, and so on. So those are all, so that's what a factor is. If you can divide your number by a different whole number and the answer is also a whole number, then you have a factor. Factors are always positive numbers as well, so they're positive whole numbers. Another thing that is common when talking about factors is a thing called prime factorization. And this is when you come up with all of the different prime factors that can be multiplied together to get your number. And so first we're going to talk about what a prime number is. And so a prime number is a whole number that only has 2 factors. And those 2 factors are 1 and the number itself. So for example, 17 would be a prime number because the only factors are 17 and 1. It can't be divided by any other numbers and not end up being a decimal. So that's a prime number. 2 is a prime number, 3 is a prime number, 7 is a prime number. Just a few examples. So in order to do this prime factorization and to find all the prime factors that can be multiplied together to get your number, we use something called a factor tree. So, say for instance, we'll go ahead and look at 24 again because that's what we did above. So if we've got 24 and we want to know the prime factorization of 24, we're going to go ahead and start with our lowest prime number that's not 1. So we know that 2 can be divided into 24 because 24 is an even number. So when you divide by 2, you're left with 12 because 24 divided by 2 is 12. So 2 times 12 is 24. So we've got 2 and 12, and then 2 can also go into 12. So 12 divided by 2 is 6. 2 can go into 6, and you're left with 3. 3 is a prime number. So these would be your prime factorization. Now you can go back through, if you do 2 times 2 times 2 times 3, that's equal to 24. So this is our prime factorization of 24. So let's go ahead now and talk about our greatest common factor. So we just learned how to find factors of different numbers. But if we had two different numbers and we wanted to find their greatest common factor, this is how you would be to do it. So first off, a common factor is a whole number that is a factor of two or more non-zero whole numbers. The greatest of these common factors is, of course, the greatest common factor. So, for example, if we had 24 and 60, and we wanted to find the greatest common factor of 24 and 60, the way that I like to do it, and I think that's most straightforward, is you're going to do a prime factorization of each of these. So 2, 12, 2, 6, 2, 3, 2, 30, 2, 15, 3, 5. Okay, so now that you've got all of these, then you're going to lay them out horizontally next to each other. So for 24, our prime factorization is 2 times 2 times 2 times 3. And then for 60, we've got 2 times 2 times 2, times 3 times 5. And then you're going to go ahead and box anything that is common. So those are all the same prime factors that 24 and 60 have in common. Then you're going to take those and multiply them together. So your greatest common factor, or GCM, is going to be equal to 2 times 2 times 3, which is going to be 4 times 3, which is 12. So your greatest common factor is equal to 12 for 24 and 60. Again, you just do the prime factorization, lay them out, box the ones that are the same in each one. So anytime you can create a pair, you just put a box around it, and then you multiply together all the boxes, and then you'll get your greatest common factor. So now let's go ahead and talk about least common multiples. Or they're often referred to as LCM. So, a multiple of a whole number is the product of the number and any non-zero whole number. A multiple that is shared by two or more numbers is a common multiple. And then the least of these common multiples is the least common multiple. So, in order to find your least common multiples, we'll go ahead and look at, let's look at 6 and 14, let's say. And we want to find the least common multiple of those two numbers. So again, you're going to do a prime factorization of each number. And same thing, you're going to lay them out on top of each other. So for 6, we've got 2 times 3. And for 14, we've got 2 times 7. Box anything that's common. And for this one, you're going to take anything that's not boxed. So 3 times 7, multiply them against each other, and then multiply them against anything that is boxed. So times 2. Notice that if it's boxed, we don't do 2 times 2. We just count this as one number and we times it by 2. So we're going to have 21 times 2, which is equal to 42. So 42 is your least common multiple for 6 and 14. Let's go ahead and look at another one of those. If we have 8 and 18, again, do your prime factorization. So for 8, we've got 2 times 2 times 2. For 18, we've got 2 times 3 times 3. Box anything in common. Least common multiple is going to be anything that's not boxed. So 2 times 2 times 3 times 3 times anything that is boxed. And anything boxed counts for one number, so times 2. So when you do the math on that, you end up with 72 is your least common multiple. Let's do one more of those. Let's do 10 and 30. So 10, we've got 2 and 5, 2, 15, 3, 5, 10, 2 times 5, 30, 2 times 3 times 5. Box any pairs. So least common multiple is going to equal anything not boxed, which in this case is just 3, and then times the pairs. So we've got a pair of 2s and a pair of 5s. So from that, you can see that we're going to get 30 as our least common multiple.